What is it like to be an atheist or social activist in Russia today? People often talk about militant atheism in the USSR under Lenin or Stalin, but what about the 21st century? Is secular activism in Russia still drawing inspiration from communism? Are new generations of Russian atheists in support of Putin's authoritarian regime? What are their political views and what are their social values? Hi everyone, this is Religiolog, and today we are going to discuss the freethought movement in modern Russia. Those of you who know my channel are probably familiar with my video series on the history of Soviet atheism. If not, please make sure to check it out. But now let me invite you to the 21st century Russia. This video is based on the work of my colleague KOROSTICHENKO. We know each other personally. Ekaterina works as a researcher at Moscow State University, where she obtained her PhD in the Department of Philosophy of Religion and Religious Studies. And her dissertation was on the organizations of freethinkers in Germany in the late 20th, early 21st centuries. In 2020, Ekaterina and her colleague Valeria SLEPTSOVA published results of their research under the title Organized Freethinking in Russia in Large Cities. The survey covered 2,500 respondents. In addition, Ekaterina conducted interviews with many well-known atheists and humanists of Russia, leaders of social movements, and those who actively popularize science. Researchers mainly focus on about 700 people from Moscow and St. Petersburg region and on 150 people who are the members of various freethought organizations. And since they concluded that the difference between the general sample and the subgroup of organized freethinkers is not significant, in my analysis I won't separate them. So now let's see what the findings of the study are. Let's begin with a social portrait of an average non-believer in Russia's big cities. As you may see on a slide, 2/3 of them are male and 1/3 are female, usually with a higher or incomplete higher education in natural and technical sciences with an average level of income. They mainly declare liberal and partially socialist political views. Some are the product of the so-called new atheist movement and draw their inspiration from Western modern activists, while others lean to the heritage of the Soviet Union and socialist or communist anti-religious ideologies. But mainly they give priority to human rights, democracy, and social justice. Please take into consideration that the study was conducted in 2020 prior to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. About half of them want Russia's rapprochement with developed countries. At the same time, only less than 10% support the idea that in the future Russia must be a great power state or that Russia must be ruled by a strong government. Among secular Russians, the level of approval of the activities of President Putin and other institutions of power does not exceed 7.3%, while over 65% disapprove the work of Putin and his government. At the same time, more than 56% wanted to migrate to a different country. Again, it's according to the 2020 report. The data also suggests that the trust level of state institutions among Russia's freethinkers doesn't exceed 12.6%. The only significant exception is the Russian Academy of Sciences. About 59% trust the academy. Next, as you may see on the slide, 94% doesn't trust Russian media and 95% doesn't trust political parties and the Russian Orthodox Church. According to the Institute of Demography, the opposite is true in relation to believers. Among believers, there are more people with conservative and anti-Western views, supporters of strong power, and those who are skeptical about liberal democracy. Basically, we won't find too many surprises here. If we compare data about secular people, let's say in the US or some European countries, more likely we'll find many similar patterns. For example, freethinkers in Russia are more tolerant than the general population regarding abortion and same-sex marriage. 91.6% of those surveyed share the view that abortion is a personal choice of a woman or a couple. Also, 85% are tolerant towards homosexuality. At the same time, please note that Russia is an extremely homophobic country. According to the Pew Research Center, only 14% Russians believe that society should accept homosexuality. The difference is gigantic, and in the recent couple of years, conservative attitude towards abortion and homosexuality is only increasing. What else can we learn about secular people in Russia? When they were asked to choose the most important problems that humanity faces today, they picked the corruption of the government. By the way, this is in tune with the tone of the liberal media, which represent corruption as the main problem of the domestic policy of the Russian Federation. Also, the respondents expressed concern about the growing social inequality, the rise of religious radicalism, and the decline of the level of education. In other words, if we solve the problem of government corruption, if we improve education and address social inequality and religious radicalism, the world, according to them, will be a better place. It seems as if here we also don't find too many surprises. There is lots of other data, and I thought what else you might find interesting, so I decided to share just a few more important conclusions. For example, that they see the main quality of a person in the ability to think critically. For the majority of respondents, religion is rather a negative phenomenon that contributes to inter-ethnic conflicts and limits personal free choice. At the same time, in relation to believers, respondents demonstrate tolerance, noting their positive qualities, such as hard working, for instance. And secular people in Russia demonstrate not so much anti-religious views as anti-clerical views. Because people themselves aren't that religious in Russia, but they specifically have a big problem with the Russian Orthodox Church and its growing influence in the public sphere and in politics. Findings of the study show that among various public and state institutions, the Russian Orthodox Church has the highest rating of disapproval and one of the highest ratings of distrust. Specifically, freethinkers actively express concern about excessive interference of the Russian Orthodox Church in the politics, in the social life, the system of education, and healthcare. 79% also agree that this influence is growing. And finally, let me say a few words about secular activism in Russia. We've learned a bit who these people are and what their values are, but what do they do about it? For example, we know that secular movements in the US are quite active. Some organize secular clubs for students on campuses, some serve as watchdog on separation of church and state issues, some popularize science, critical thinking, and secular values, they organize conferences, distribute secular literature, try to be vocal in media, advertisement, and so on. In other words, they are active and visible. But what about a country such as Russia, with its authoritarian regime? We know that there is no alternative media, and the state allies with the Russian Orthodox Church to maintain its power. In modern Russia, expressing liberal views that openly criticize local government could be extremely dangerous. The judicial system also isn't free of corruption and is loyal to the government. Basically, there is no separation of powers in this country, therefore most people don't feel safe, even those who openly express their loyalty towards the regime. Under such conditions, of course, it's hard to conduct any activism, so freethought movements aren't that active, and the survey shows that they are not a homogeneous community. They consist of subgroups that differ in worldview, political preferences, and attitudes towards religion. For example, the study concluded that active participation in some secular organization or avoiding them is not a matter of worldview, but of personal preference, occupation, or simply a random chance. Only a very tiny proportion of non-believers from the secular environment participate in the activities of the secular communities. But even they aren't that active. They almost don't play any significant role in the social life of the country. And even when they unite in various communities, they don't try to organize themselves to advocate or cultivate a secular worldview, or to actively express anti-clerical sentiments. Yes, here and there they do organize some events, but mainly they promote their ideas through the internet and social media. Unlike in some European countries, secular communities in Russia don't focus on solving some social issues or on the social needs of the population, like secular festive culture. No, here their primary concern is to spread their worldview and to protect the rights of unbelievers. And usually, only those who are a part of some secular group would actively criticize religion or promote secular ideas on the internet. The vast majority of secular people are indifferent to religion. So, to conclude, organized secular activism in Russia exists mainly on the internet. At the end, I just would like to repeat again that freethinkers in Russia aren't a homogeneous group. For instance, about 35% define themselves as atheists, from 10 to 15% choose skepticism, agnosticism, materialism, or freethinking as their worldview. And as I've mentioned, they have different political views. Some are the product of the so-called New Atheist movement and draw their inspiration from modern Western activists or the European Enlightenment, while others lean to the heritage of the Soviet Union and socialist or communist anti-religious ideologists. My friends, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you liked it, you may want to check some of my other videos. Please share your thoughts in the comments, whether something surprised you about this data or not, and consider supporting my work on this channel. The links will be in the description. I wish you peace and health wherever you are.